Most organisations talk about high performance and resilience, but when things get difficult, that's when you find out whether you've built a winning team or just a group of people who happen to work together. I'm Abbie Dewhurst, and welcome back to Ctrl Alt Disrupt from DTP, the podcast where we talk about the real challenges IT leaders face and the solutions that actually work. Today's episode is about something every leader thinks about, but few genuinely crack. How do you build a team that doesn't just perform when everything's going well, but actually gets better under pressure? Well, the connection might surprise you. The principles that create champion teams in elite sports are exactly the same principles that transform IT departments from reactive firefighters into strategic powerhouses. Joining me today are two people who know this from very different angles. Jamie Peacock is a former international rugby league player who captained both Great Britain and England, won pretty much everything that there is to win in the sport, and now works with organisations on leadership and building champion teams. And Steve Clegg is CFO here at DTP, where he's seen firsthand what happens when you apply these principles to how teams operate and deliver. Steve, Jamie, thank you so much for joining me. Let's start at the beginning with the individual. I think ultimately that's where everything starts, isn't it? And Jamie, you talk a lot about how championship teams are built on individuals who are going to take ownership of their kind of behaviour and their performance. Not necessarily because somebody is watching, but because someone has set their own standards. And that sounds brilliant in theory, doesn't it? But I think what that actually looks like when someone makes that shift is what I'm really keen to hear from you today.
Yeah. Do you think you mean the shift to where someone really owns what they're doing day to day?
As opposed to that external validation, they're doing it for themselves, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a huge shift in terms of your own kind of fulfillment and happiness as well with that. For example, I think a lot of professional sports people, when they first go through, tend to see even a team environment, you're really motivated by external factors, trying to get in the team. You are concerned with what your teammates do, competition as well, press as well, media as well. There's lots of different opinions on you as an individual, but I think that the sooner you can learn that it's you pushing you, and the real competition is against the person you look at in the mirror. Do you know? And if you can compete against that person day in, day out and deliver with that person day in, day out, then you'll give yourself every chance of being successful. But then you'll also have that sense of satisfaction because you know you've given your best every day. And that's the kind of one thing we're in charge of every single day, is giving our best. Nobody else decides that. Only you'll decide that. And only you'll be able to decide at the end of the day when you're brushing your teeth whether you've actually done that or not. So I think the best performers kind of understand it. It's about that intrinsic motivator, about trying to be that best version of yourself, but then also having that honesty with yourself, whether you've actually done that at the end of the day. Because I think with the best one in the world, a lot of people are very good at lying to themselves and making excuses and validating those excuses why they didn't perform well. Whereas I think the more you are a high performer, the more you motivate intrinsically and you focus on what you can control and don't give excuses.
I think some of the examples that you gave there as well relate obviously to your experience in extreme sport. There's audience, there's press, there's lots of external people looking at your behaviour. And that is the case in business. It just looks very different, doesn't it? And I wonder what that kind of personal accountability looks like in the sport world versus the business world.
I think it's the same thing, right? I think as a person, you need to deliver on your word to people, whether that's in sport or in business. I believe that if you say you're going to do something for somebody, you get that done, and I think that is accountability, right? With that, it's accountability to the people you work alongside, whether in a sports team or in a business organisation. And I think the key thing with that accountability is it creates trust in you from other people. And I think trust is a really powerful kind of currency to have as a person, whether that's in a sports environment or in a business environment. I think certainly as a leader, the currency you're dealing is trust. A great way to get trust is be accountable, deliver on your actions, not only to yourself, but also to other people as well with it.
Yeah. And Steve, is this something that you see play out in business? And if so, how does it kind of present itself?
Yeah, I mean, just to go to the first point you made, both of you, about the accountability of the individual. It is so easy to start looking over your shoulder and thinking about, where do I fit what with the competition, that need to perform and to make a show and a statement, as opposed to actually thinking what is valuable here, what do I need to do to not so much impress but to achieve. What do you need to do? What are your gaps? Because if you're focusing on those, you are actually taking accountability for your own actions, as opposed to worrying about what it looks like.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's a huge resonance.
They say, don't they, comparison is the biggest thief of joy. And I think that's something that when you really think about, and when you realise some of your kind of stresses and maybe some of the days when you've not felt so good, and you actually look inward, I think it is often to do with that comparison externally, isn't it?
It stops you focusing on yourself. It stops you focusing on the very things that you need to do to raise your own game, in whatever it is that you're doing.
So easily distracted in those sorts of situations. Jamie, what do you think happens to people who can't step out of their comfort zone for whatever reason? They come into work every single day, they do the same sort of thing, and they might see lots of other people around them going on to achieve things that they want to do, and they can kind of almost see what it is that they need to do to take them there, but they just can't seem to shake themselves out of this safe space that they're in.
Yeah, I feel sorry for people like that, really, because I think you're talking a bit difference between having a growth mindset and a closed mindset. So a growth mindset person, I think, will see a challenge as an opportunity, whereas someone with a closed mindset will see that challenge as something to shrink away for, and they will give themselves a number of reasons why they won't be able to do that. I think the key in an organisation is to recruit people with growth mindsets, people who are prepared to step outside your comfort zone. And yeah, it is nervous, and yeah, it can be exciting, and sometimes not the greatest things happen to us, but we can always learn from. If we step outside our comfort zone, hopefully it'll go well, we'll develop as a person. But then if we step outside our comfort zone and it doesn't go as planned, we still learn from that anyway with it. So I think for me, it's getting people to understand it's kind of win-win and reframe it. Just, I love a saying, right? Choose courage over comfort. And, whenever it comes to any decisions and I'm a bit iffy about doing it, I think, right, choose courage. Don't choose a comfortable thing. Choose a thing that requires courage. And you'll either get it right and you'll enjoy that success, or you won't get it right and it's a chance to develop again and go at it again with it. And I think, maybe I probably didn't understand that so much when I was younger, and it's a skill I've developed over time by trying to push myself outside my comfort zone and trying to learn from that, and learn through failure, first of all, about not doing it, then going back and getting outside my comfort zone afterwards.
What were the two mindsets that you described there?
So there's a growth and a closed mindset.
And can you be both those people and at times in your life flip between both those things, do you think?
That's a good question. I think generally people are a closed mindset. They're very hard to open up into a growth mindset. I think it's a very small percentage of people, from my experience working with people, who can make that transition from somebody who's closed in on what they do and can't see the development opportunities to someone who has a growth mindset. I think the key is sometimes people, I would say, might be neutral, right? So when you're younger, you might be neutral and you might not have a closed mindset, but you don't know about this growth mindset about, right, if I take an opportunity and then I can develop from it, because you kind of don't know what you don't know. So I think as a leader, it's trying to help younger people on that journey to show them that, growth comes with a risk of failure, but that failure is also something to learn from as well with it.
I mean, and self-discipline is something that you kind of touched on a little bit there. Steve, is there a way that you can spot someone that does have really good self-discipline versus somebody that is maybe just kind of going through the motions of their career?
Oh, that's a great question. Because it does vary. I mean, when you look at the person, that specific person, trying to work out whether it comes because it's easy, because it's natural, because what they're doing looks great, because they've always done it, whether it comes from great discipline or not. It's quite easy to get lost in performance as opposed to what these behaviours really signify. And so I think probably the acid test for it is going back to what Jamie just said around, if you find something that does take courage for them, because they might be a top performer in many, many respects, but they might have this kind of a weakness that they're not really aware of, or they try to cover up for, or maybe they've always covered up for it through the way in which formative years have made them feel, actually, that's not, I'm not good at that. Whether that's fair or not, there's a lot of people that have some funny beliefs about themselves and blind spots. So when you challenge the person to try to do something which isn't easy for them, that's when you start to see whether or not they've got the true desire to go and challenge themselves, and whether they've got, and then can display the disciplines that you need to be successful with. So I don't think it's quite as easy as just saying, yes, they've got it, no, they haven't.
Yeah.
I agree with what you're saying now, 100%, that you only find out if someone's got self-discipline when things are difficult. So, for example, anybody can go to the gym when it's easy and we've got a day off, right? But can a person go to the gym when they've got 10 hours work to do? That's a person who's self-disciplined, and you only find out about people when things are a little bit difficult and challenging with it. I don't think you find about somebody's self-discipline in kind of easy moments. I think you got to test people a little bit.
I see that all the time at work because of all the different competing demands that you've got. The person that's worked out what is core, even when they're not being asked to do it, but they know it's important, as a bedrock to whatever kind of thing we're trying to do at work. And it's the same with fitness. If you're not doing it quietly and getting on with it, and because you're too busy, and you're not doing certainly within the finance, which is where I grew up in, if people aren't doing the boring stuff to make sure everything's clean and sorted, then all of a sudden you find that you're building on a house of cards. And it's really, insecurity grows like that. So it's about finding people that are prepared to go and make sure that the key things are covered off always.
Got to have good foundations. It's no good having a great, gorgeous top of the range kitchen if your house is going to crumble down.
Exactly that. Yeah.
And I like the analogy around going to the gym on the days when you're really busy, Jamie. You're sat here in shorts, ready to hot foot it over the road to a gym. So I appreciate you're a committed man. Now, I think when it comes to the individuals who are committed and they've got high standards, brilliant, win, tick, tick, tick. But I think none of that really matters if the leadership doesn't then model that behaviour that they're asking for. So, Jamie, you've got this line that really stuck with me, and it's the standard you walk past is the standard you accept. And I'd never really thought about it, and I gave it some real thought this morning. It's quite brutal, isn't it? But I think it's also very true. The moment that a leader just tolerates behaviour of any sort, poor behaviour, cuts corners, I feel like that is the moment that everything can just fall apart. So I'm really keen to know what authentic leadership looks like when things do get tough and when corners are potentially being cut and when behaviour is getting a little bit tumultuous.
Yeah, there's two things around that then. I think the foundational piece to that is that you have to have high standards as a leader first. If you want to deliver hard truths to people and have honest conversations, you can't do that from a place with shaky foundation. So, the easiest example of this would be people turning up on time for a meeting, right? If you're a leader who's continually 1 or 2 minutes late, then it's very difficult for you to have an honest conversation with somebody and be authentic about their inability to turn up on time for a meeting because you're not exhibiting that behavior. So foundation number one for me is you need to have consistent high standards yourself as a leader. And you know what, if that's a bit difficult for you, then maybe leadership's not for you, because that's the tough part about leadership. That's the difficult part of it, that you have to show up continuously, whether you feel great or you don't feel great. And that's what the best leaders have, that mental toughness to be able to do that in terms of standards. And then I think that then allows you to be able to hold people accountable to the standards that you want within your kind of team or your business. So I think whatever value you want to hold people accountable for, whatever standard you want to hold them accountable, then you have to be, an A-star student at that kind of value. And then it's far easier to be authentic in holding people accountable to it. With it, I think if you do the opposite, then people will not buy into what you're doing. And unfortunately, sometimes at leadership, you have to ask people to do things that are a little bit difficult, or they've not done the things they need to do, and that's just about guiding and coaching them through it. But it just needs to come from that place of high performance to start with. I think to be you use the word authentic there, to be authentic, I feel.
Yeah. And what I find that interesting there is that you referenced that it's actually not for everyone. Some people are not cut out for a role like that, but for whatever reason, whether it be career progression, whether it be money, whether it just be a kind of situational thing, they've kind of ended up in a role where they're actually they're in a leadership role, but they're perhaps not really comfortable there, and they were never really destined to be there, and they're not really the right person for the job. What impact do you think then that can have on the rest of the team?
Yeah, I think it can be quite damaging. I think there is a lot of research around that generally you get quite often promoted in a business because you're very technically good at your job, but that's a different set of skills you need to once you start leading
Entirely.
someone. So the best example you can give is in sales, I think, because sales is, very lone wolf for a lot of people. It's lone wolf, get targets, get your targets and drive it. So you can become the best salesperson, but that's quite an individual way of doing things. But then someone says to you, well, you've got to lead a group of 10 people and get them to do exactly what you're doing, and you're used to just looking after yourself. So I think you have to choose wisely who you want in a leadership role, and quite often it might not be your absolute A-star performer. It might be the person who has got different characteristics around that who could develop into being a strong leader. Yeah, I think there's some things that are essential around it. Maybe, you have a strong work ethic and you have good values and you have integrity. They're important pieces of it, but perhaps not always being technically the best at the job is not the right reason to promote people into a leadership role.
And I think when it comes to manning a team, certainly when I think back to my own individual experience of having great managers, I think the best leaders that I've ever worked under have somehow tread the line between personable and feeling like your friend while also being somebody that you have to respect and is senior to you. Steve, how on earth do you go about that balancing act?
How do I do it? Yeah, I mean, there's a thing called radical candor, which is I think what we're talking about, where to be really candid with somebody, then you've got to be authentic. You've got to do what Jamie said.
Yeah.
You can't give somebody a lecture on timekeeping if it's hollow in terms of your own behaviours. So I think that radical piece is you can almost be as candid with somebody as you like, but if there's no empathy and there's no support for the individual and no personal care for that person, then it's just hollow. So you've got to engage with somebody properly. You've got to support them, and they've also got to feel supported. So once you've got that trust in that relationship, then you can start to push it and drive great results. But it does come from authentic, strong model behaviours, because the authority that you have is simply that. So yeah, you've absolutely got to do the things that you're talking about. And what I find is especially in business where you've got lots of competing demands, the demand for profitability, the demand to service customers, the demand to support your people. They're all sort of three separate things. Where they come together, that's the sweet spot.
I think when it comes to kind of leading a team through change or through transformation, that can feel quite scary at any level, whether you've just walked through the door and you're brand new somewhere or whether you're the kind of top dog CEO. But I think when it comes to being a leader in those sorts of situations, how does all of this translate into guiding other people through a change, do you think?
Yeah, that's the thing with change. Yeah, everybody likes it unless they have to do it, right? Yeah, I just think there's some key things as a leader that I think, first of all, you have to present the benefits of change. This is the reason. I think your communication has to be good, right? These are the reasons why we're changing. These are going to be the benefits of it. Then I just feel that you need to lead in that way with it. So, an easy example would be you're adopting a new system of doing things or a new processes of doing it. Well, say we're adopting it in sport, a new technique in defence, a new system for the team to use, then I've got to really embrace that as a leader, because if I really embrace that, then there's a chance everybody else will do too with it. So a good example would be 2008, we came back from the World Cup and the Australians had taken a massive leap forward in terms of technology and what they were using, GPS, heart rate, live monitoring of all this. We were way behind in that, but we realised we had to change and adapt to that. So as a new player in a team, a lot of players could be sceptical of it because there's no hiding place once you've got an heart rate monitor on a GPS in your training, right? We know how hard you're working and we know how far you're running. So people can either hide away from that, or as a leader, you've got to fully embrace it. So my thought was, I'm going to really embrace this, find out as much knowledge as I can about it, and openly share my use of this technology to the team and the players and be excited about it, because then I've got more chance of getting that team bought into the change. So I think you're energy and enthusiasm for the change has to be high. You have to present, the outlooks. I used to say, well, this is great because it's going to make me a fitter, more better player because we're being specific about our training rather than just, putting our finger in the air and seeing
Yeah.
which way the wind blows with it. So I think that's the key with it, modeling that behavior, being excited about it and embracing the change yourself with it.
Yeah, but I guess there are so many ways that could be handled so differently, and it would have had a really negative impact on the team. Is there like a big red flag, like a big leadership mistake that either of you have seen over the years that you would like to kind of highlight now as something? Don't try this at home.
I think about Jamie's point about communication. First off, as he says, modelling the behaviour, embracing it yourself, being open in your communication, but also making space to listen and to deal with people's hang-ups. Because as we said before, if somebody's got a perfectly closed mindset, you won't get them there. And they probably shouldn't be in the team anyway, as hard as you try.
Yeah.
But where people are wavering, they're not ready to commit, they bring baggage or misconceptions or even reasonable questions before they might just be quite tentative in nature. To overcome that, you've really got to engage with the person and sit down with them and work out where they're coming from. And I think that's what being, team, business transformations, even the simple act of delegating a task to somebody, if it's and you should be able to do this because it's important, but you don't bother to find out how they're coming to it and what their perceptions are and how they see the context, then it can fall down. So and I think that time spent up front, engaging with somebody, selling the change to them, but also listening to what their reservations might be, saves you loads in terms of their enthusiasm and their engagement with it over the long term.
Yeah. And I guess also some of those difficult conversations ultimately have to come in feedback. Sometimes you have to give bad feedback or negative feedback or constructive criticism, shall we call it. But I guess there are times actually where you do just need to discipline somebody, and that must be a very difficult conversation to have. How do you do that? How do you give hard feedback but not completely destroy trust, do you think, within a team?
I do have a thought on that. If you go back to being really candid with somebody, if you've earned the right to have a strong relationship with somebody and where trust is high, you can be really honest.
Yeah.
If you haven't got that and your arms removed, you can really fall into corporate speak and actually being, you challenge your own values because you've got a value of duty towards the business and you've got a value of honesty. And these are in conflict when you're, thinking, well, actually, we don't have a high degree of trust here, but I've got a job to do. And so the discipline and control aspects of your job they can be quite sterile. And that's not helpful to anybody. So really, you're always looking for trust, strong, open communications. That always has to be the objective. And where you can't do that, it's as being as professional and objective as you can and keeping opinion that you can't substantiate out of the conversation, because that just gets emotions really high.
It comes down to foundations, I think, again, doesn't it? If the foundations are good and solid and strong and you've put in a lot of the legwork, then the person can take a couple of knocks and it can weather a bit of a storm, and it there's a bit more kind of literal foundation there underneath that conversation and the points that you're making.
But it's about finding that balance and how far you can push it. And it's obviously, it's a function of the strength of the relationship and the person on the receiving end.
Let's talk a little bit about the team itself then. Like we've spoken about brilliant individuals, strong leaders, but I think collectively, if the team doesn't really work and doesn't commit, you're not winning anything, are you? So you talk about disagree and commit, Jamie, which I think is one of the hardest things to get right. How do you create an environment where people can challenge decisions, they can argue their case, but then kind of fully back the plan once it's been made? Because ultimately it won't always be exactly how you want to do something.
Yeah, I think that's all down to ego, me. I do really think that's down to ego. I think it's trying to create an environment as a leader where you're humble and you act without ego, and you quite often do selfless acts for the team, and then it's easier to get the team to do those selfless acts, to put their own personal opinions aside and then do what's right for the team with it again. So again, we keep coming back to modelling behaviour, and I feel so. Let's say the Rhinos, we had a number of senior players who I feel were pretty humble. and pretty selfless, and would put the team before their actual needs in some of the game plans that we'd have, and they'd try to do the right thing by the team rather than what they want to do from that. I mean, I give you an example of one I did, so when I towards the back stages of playing for England, there's another player, James Graham, great player, great passer of the ball, and there used to be a bit of a move where both players, both props went together, and one was a support player and the other one passed. And the support player, you're more or less a dummy runner. You're not going to get the ball. So at the Rhinos, I played that option with the ball, and James did the same for St Helens. So when we come to England, it could be a battle of egos. Who wants to do that? But you know what? I knew he was better at doing that than me, and I knew my role in the team would be better served running alongside him and taking away some of the focus from him so he could execute that great skill of his of passing. So I just thought the idea here is, I might disagree with it a bit myself, and I want to do the passing of the ball, and I want to be better. For the right thing for the team is to do this.
Yeah.
So I think the more times you do that as a leader, then it's easier to have that disagreement with other people. Say a player who's not a leader disagrees with a role, and you can use that story. So look, I give you an example of a story when I disagreed with it, but I changed what I did, and I bought into the ethos of the team. So I think there's kind of two stories in there, like not having an ego as a leader that allows you then to have disagreements, but you just get on with what's right for the team. But then also another skill that maybe is overlooked a bit, I think, is having a playbook of stories from your own career as a leader that you can use to bring people along, so that's a playbook I could use, a story that I could get someone on point if they're going, well, I'm going to disagree and keep disagreeing. I'm not going to commit. And I'll say, well, this is an area where I had a disagreement with what I could do, but I committed to the game plan anyway. And I think that's something we overlook a little bit, is that I think as a leader, you should spend time thinking about your own career and stories, maybe where you've overcome some resilience, or you've showed some self-discipline, or you've shown some commitment, and it's led to being successful. And then you use those stories to inspire your team, because I think nothing connects. That is authentic leadership, because that is you talking about something that's happened to you where there's an outcome that's positive, and then you get people bought into that because people are buying to you with it.
I think also showing a bit of vulnerability is a good thing in those situations, because it can feel quite intimidating if you're the person being spoken to and being told what to do, but actually to be able to, show a bit more of a human element like you just did and like you just said there.
Yeah, I mean, I think this, say 15 years ago, I kind of tried to develop this a bit of my leadership style, a bit longer than that now, 16, 17 years ago now, went through, so like 2008, 2009, realised I had to change a bit as a leader and be a bit more open and honest about, my ability to make mistakes and my ability to own up to them. And I think by doing that, it really connects you with the team. By doing that, I think saying, I don't know, or can you help me, has to come from a place of strength. Only confident people can do that, right? It's the person who's not confident says, I've got all the answers here, because they're not willing, or they're scared of doing it with it. And I think it comes from a place of strength.
Absolutely. You often see, people closing meetings saying, any clarifications? Basically, have you understood it? Because we all understand it. I've been very, very clear. Whereas, the more humble person will say, have I missed something? And in a real way, as in, can you help me? Am I getting this right? What do you think? And actually mean that. Because then you get the feedback and you can go, yeah, I'm not holding the truth here. And that when somebody's running or leading something, being seen as the person with the answer, it's actually, it can be quite toxic. So actually opening it up and getting people's real feedback is really helpful.
Yeah, I think the disagree and commit is really interesting, and it's a bit like at the end of the day when you look back at your day and you think, what would I have done differently? How would I have behaved differently? Because maybe you've had your cup of tea, you sat on the sofa, you've had a couple of hours to decompress, and you're in a really calm mindset at that point. But in the moment when emotions are running high and you're maybe a little bit in fight or flight, your adrenaline, maybe you've just knocked your glass of water all over your laptop as well. There can be so many different things, I think, that factor into your day that mean that in those situations you're not in the right frame of mind necessarily to be saying disagree and commit, and you're how do you have that mindset and try and channel that mindset even in times of stress or heightened emotion?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say this is something that I've worked incredibly hard on over the last kind of 10 or 12 years for myself, because I'm quite a one of my strengths is to be able to emotionally connect with people. I've got, depth of emotions. I've got strong empathy with people, and I feel emotions a lot. But there's a couple of things that have really helped me, through just researching stuff. So two I want to go through. One is just a little system called like petrol or water. So whenever you are in a moment, and a little spark gets lit and you feel that emotional response, and the other person has emotional response, you can make a decision. Imagine that as a fire, whether your next action is going to pour water on it or you're going to pour petrol on it. And I think the more often you can step back and go, right, what would lead me to pour water onto this situation with it, can allow you to be more calm and effective as a leader. Then another thing, I came across recently, I love this saying that all emotions are welcome, all behaviors are not. So we can't help the way we feel in our emotions. We have no control over our emotions, but the thing we have control of is our behaviors afterwards. So then it makes you feel not shameful about emotions that you have. Sometimes you might feel, jealous of somebody. Sometimes you might feel angry of somebody. That's not your doing. Your emotions just happen. But then how you behave afterwards, I think that's the choice that you make with it. And those two things have been very powerful kind of processes that have allowed me to be far more effective with dealing with my emotions and behaving in the way which I think gets the best out of people rather than not getting the best out of them.
Is this something that you've seen kind of play out, Steve, in business before?
Yeah, I mean, as we're talking about leadership here quite a bit, that you might have the right to speak and, pull rank or have authority, but you don't have the obligation. You don't need to come out with something that demonstrates your authority. Actually, if you talk about petrol and water, the biblical phrase, blessed are the peacemakers, somebody who's actually focused on what is the bigger picture here, what is going to contribute to getting to the objective, as opposed to, and I'm all guilty of it, I'm certainly guilty of it, reacting in the moment emotionally to what's in front of you, as opposed to stepping back and thinking, what's the best thing we can do here? So yeah.
Yeah, and I think sometimes perhaps we've had experiences when it comes to HR or when it comes to training that we've had to do, how to work well with the team. It can feel a little bit tick boxy, a little bit corporate spiel. How do you think we take it from this is just something that we're doing because our company have to this is something that we're doing because our company really care, because our company really believe in that, this kind of team first corporate speak, if you like? People need to believe in it, don't they? So how do we do that?
I think you've got to draw a straight line between the thing that you're asking somebody to do and why. And if you can't do that, then it's false. The need to get proper buy-in, you need to be able to explain. And actually, sometimes if it is just for pure compliance reasons, and it is a tick box, and it's because there's some external validation of something and we're doing it just to prove that we are doing something, then just be honest about it, because sometimes you don't have any choice in it. And if there is usually there is a reason why you're doing it. There is the best things are where the person doing it, the person who's been asked to do the thing, it works for them, their ego, what they want to do in life. It works for the line manager in the team, because actually they'd be quite good if it worked for them if you could do that thing as well. And it works for the organisation as a whole. And if you're in that confluence of those three things coming together, then it's brilliant. But if it's not, and it's, what, you're great, we really like what you do, but we just need you to go and do that. Run into that wall again for us, please, Jamie. We know you want to score some tries, but can you just go and do that? You're here to do this, this, and this, and that's what's on your CV. That's why you came to us. That's what's in your job description. But we really need those boxes moving, and you get those moments. And so sometimes you just got to say to them, "We need it doing, and you're the best person to do it. Please, can you help?"
Yeah. Honesty,
well, honesty, yeah. I totally agree with that. Sometimes, how often do we have to do things at work we don't want to do, right? So why not just do it to the best of your ability than moan about it?
Yeah.
Because that's like a double loss, isn't it? Because you're doing something you don't want to do and you're moaning about it. So I just can't get the sense in that. So I think if you're doing something that you have to do because of a compliance or because that's the rules, well, do it as well as you possibly can then.
Life.
Yeah.
And I want to talk a little bit about commitment. I think those two things go sort of really nicely and tying hand in hand. It's something that connects everything that we've discussed today. And Jamie, you frame it as action, not intent. It's what you do when no one's watching, when motivation fades, when it's easier to cut corners. And I think that's where the gap can often appear between teams that talk about being high performance and those that actually are high performance. So for both of you, this question to both of you, what does genuine commitment look like, do you think? And how do you build a culture where it's not just expected, but where it actually happens?
I just think probably it comes down to your behaviours and what you exhibit as a leader, So first, I think we're always going to come back to that if you show high levels of commitment, to what you're going to do, for your own performance, but then what you're going to do for the team, and you deliver on your word again, that kind of sets the behavioural standard.
Yeah.
But then you also I think, have to promote behaviours where people exhibit that as well. So you've got somebody who shows high levels of commitment within your team. Well, give them the reward for that, give them the praise for it. Behaviours you promote persist in whatever we do in life, good or bad. So the more behaviours that are based around commitment you promote, then more people will buy into it. And then that becomes your culture through, the way that you behave and what you're promoting through, your praise. I think they're the two key things for me, really. I'm sure there's other things to it, but I think they would really add to it.
Yeah, if you get somebody that fudges things, even a little thing, it doesn't need to be great. It just needs to passable. We just gotta sell this, and in the lowercase s, sell it to anybody internally. Just if we do that, it'll have it'll look right. Won't be right, but it'll look right, and we can con them. Near enough is good enough. The sort of person that walks past the piece of rubbish because nobody's seeing them, so they're going to get away with it. Why should they bend down? If that crumbles, people can see through it.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, everybody sees through that. So not doing that, not having that as part of your culture is the starting point. But then, as Jamie said, if you can bring it into your standard operating procedure, as in we praise that person bothered to pick that up. That's great. We like that. That shows the sort of attitudes and behaviours that we want here. That's where I think really good operating procedures really, really help, where you hardwire that in. We get a lot of external validation at DTP from all sorts of different bodies. And that helps because things that you might have not done, this week, last week, you need to do. It has to be right. And those people that their default mechanism is, well, it needs to be right. Even when it doesn't have to be perfect, they want it to be right. You can start to build real strength with that because you can walk away and you can leave them to it. And that's when you've really properly delegated, because you've got people that take responsibility for the things that are around them. Even when they're not actually, they've got all the authority to act, they take responsibility because they want good outcomes. And that's when you know that your culture's building really strong. When you find out that somebody's asked the first, second, third, and fourth question of the problem, that have they solved it right or not, and they've already explored all those options. That's when you've got the sort of people that you want to model their behaviour.
Yeah, I think when you sit there and say it, both of you, it sounds so simple. And I think we'll all be listening to this going, of course, yeah, if only, why aren't I doing it like that? But the difficulty with something like commitment is that it's invisible. It's not, you don't walk around with a big fat commitment badge on your head when you are doing something. And sometimes you can be really committed and you can be really disciplined, and it kind of ends up going under the radar a little bit. And sometimes I think then you can feel a little bit demoralised. So how do you make sure as a leader that you are spotting commitment? Because it looks different, I guess, for different people in different roles. And one person's committed that month might be really impressive because of how non-committed they were the month before. So it's all relative as well. How do you spot it? How do you kind of celebrate it, do you think?
I think that's really interesting. You can do it in terms of qualitative. You look at somebody and think, oh, they've not bothered to do that. Why is that?
Yeah.
What's going on there? And noticing that actually some people permanently have the mindset of doing everything they can within their power and spanning out beyond their sort of realm of control to try to get to the right outcome. So you can do it in terms of those interactions with people, and you can do it through measurement. lots and lots of metrics. But I think over time, it really boils down to you start to form a view of somebody as to how they behave when they weren't asked.
Yeah.
And are they responding to, the carrot, or are they just afraid of the stick?
Mm. And I wonder how it sort of connects to your experience at DTP and how they maybe approach transformation and looking at measuring commitment and things. What's your experience?
Well, we don't have a formalized measure of commitment.
Does anyone?
I mean, yeah, it's a strange concept, isn't it? Because it can mean different things to different people, because people have got different values. Everybody comes to work with their own personal view of the world. But certainly when you're challenging people, you very quickly work out whether, because what often when you're going through a transformation is you're still doing your old job, but you're also having to do the new thing at the same time whilst you're transferring across. And so are they fully committing to those new things that you're asking of them? Or is it, I'll do it when I get time, as opposed to making time for what's important? And I think it is that qualitative view.
And I think being committed is, ironically, something that takes constant work and constant commitment. You can be so committed for 6 months and then you just feel exhausted with it. Maybe you need a holiday, whatever it may be. How do you think we kind of separate people or teams that do manage to sustain maybe a bit of a dip and pick it back up? Is that something that you've seen in your career, Jamie?
I just think you make a good point here that commitment's very simple to talk about, and commitment's very easy to do for 3 days out of 7, but it's the consistency, and that's what you're kind of looking for, is consistency. And I also think as well, just touching on a point there, it's about understanding your kind of cadence of what would say, a performance. So my example would be mine. I can be incredibly committed within my work and consistent with it for about 6 weeks. Then I need to get away for about 4 or 5 days, and I need to reset again, and then I can go again for another 6 weeks, very, very committed. And I think that's one of the keys with teams that are highly committed, is there are breaks in there. You take breaks away from what you do, you reset again with what you're doing with it. So I think that's an important part of it, is that to have intensity in your commitment and be consistent, then you need breaks away from it. You need breaks away from doing that. I don't think any team or anybody can do it 100%, because, for a sporting analogy, no season goes continuously onwards, do it? They have a pre-season, they have a break from doing it because it's too difficult to try and do with it. So I think that's an important factor in it.
I think when you've got clear priorities and you've got clarity over them, it makes being consistent and therefore being committed so much easier. It's so easy when you've been asked to do loads of different things to all of a sudden you start dropping the ball, and you're not focused on the core things that are really, really important. And I often think that if you ask somebody to do 10 things, they might do 9 of them, still feel like they've failed.
Yeah.
Whereas if you say to somebody, no, if you can get to lunchtime and you've done 3 things, this is a really successful day. And all of a sudden you get to lunchtime or 11 o'clock and you've done those 3 things and you're buzzing. And actually, if you go on to do another 6 and you get to the 9, you're feeling like a champion.
Yeah.
Whereas, it's all a question of the context and how somebody presents and what they perceive as being successful. Yeah. Because you can fail by doing an awful lot, but still feel like a failure. Whereas if you've got real clarity on what you're trying to achieve, and you get that feedback that says you're achieving it, that's really good, and keep focusing on those core things, and then good things will come from that. I think that's when people buy into believing in themselves and believing in their role within an organization or a team. And that's when they're more likely to recognize that doing those core things will lead to good outputs. But if you've given people, if you're overwhelmed and you can't face everything, which we can never get through everything we want to do in a day, you can start to crack under that pressure. So I think it's really important when people are approaching their work is to make sure they've got real clarity. And that's quite difficult to do, because to sit down with anybody else, even if they're in your own team and and you've done that job before, Yeah, but you've not done it from their perspective and do it their way because they've got different skills to you. So you've actually got to really engage with people and try and say, well, what does good look like? And how can we make that? How can we make good easy? How can we make great commitment and great performance natural? How can we do that as opposed to leaving somebody else to work that out? And I think that ambiguity is a bit of a killer.
I think you've potentially answered it, but I'm going to ask it anyway. My final question, which I think is about reinforcing, how on earth as a leader do you try and reinforce commitment every single day? Is there one thing that you think as a leader? Yeah, take it away.
Yeah, I saw that before, what's the one thing? And I just thought, my initial thought again was there is no silver bullet with it. It is just having the mental toughness to be consistent around it yourself. And I just think people just follow what you do, not what you say. So I think the one thing you should always come back to is, am I being committed to my word, to my team? So I would say, coming full circle, that would be the thing I would always ask myself. Am I being committed to my word, to my team? And then I think you've got more chance of getting them to commit to their word and you'll get more commitment out of it. So that would be it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and that's about being authentic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Am I being honest with myself? Can I look at myself in the mirror at the end of the day and say, am I comfortable with my performance? And you could flip that on its head and ask everybody in the business how they think you're doing, and some of that will have real value. And I think it's a great thing to do. But at the end of the day, you've got to take that feedback on board, reconcile yourself to it and say, okay, am I comfortable or do I need to change something? And I think it's about being honest.
It's the kind of conversation that I think we all need to have first thing Monday morning every week. Yeah. What a great way to go into a new week. Thank you so much, Jamie, Steve. That was so fascinating. Speaking of consistency, Jamie, I know that you have CrossFit class to get to, so
I do, yeah.
We'll wrap it up. But thank you. That was really,
I actually don't really want to do it, but I know I need to do it.
You're going to do it. You've got the shorts on. That's the hard bit.
Yeah, I got my kit on. That's why I'm going to get it done. That's why I did it on purpose. So if I come here in civvies, I'm not going to go. I'm just going to go back home and cook tea and go to bed.
And this is why we listen to you when it comes to speaking about inspirational things. Thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it for episode 2 of Ctrl Alt Disrupt from DTP. What Jamie and Steve have shown us today is that champion teams aren't built on talent alone. They're built on discipline, on accountability, trust, resilience, and they're reinforced every single day through individual choices and how leaders show up. Winning is a byproduct of culture, and culture gets created from deliverability. For IT teams, this matters because the same principles that create champion rugby teams are exactly the same as what create departments that don't just react to problems, but that anticipate them, that solve them, and drive the business forward. Thanks for listening. If you want more conversations like this, subscribe to Ctrl Alt Disrupt wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Abbie Dewhurst. See you next time.